الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم to all on this blessed. Can people hear me okay? To all on this blessed Jumu'ah Mubarakah. We'd like to welcome you. We'd like to welcome you to the last Jumu'ah here on the 7th floor of the Madina Institute, South Africa. I was reminded, at least metaphorically, of the Prophet's journey, alayhi salatu wasalam, to the highest heaven, the 7th heaven, during Isra and Mi'raj, when he met Allah. And he realized that yes, it's important to make it to the 7th level, but once you've reached those heights, you can only reach more heights, newer heights, by coming back down. So therefore, we're moving to the 3rd floor to begin another climb towards a new mountaintop. There was a very beautiful quote that I encountered by Nelson Mandela, I think about 2 weeks ago, when Sheikh Minoli was here. We were visiting the District 6 Museum, and there was a quote I encountered there about Nelson Mandela talking about the long walk to freedom in South Africa, referring to the long fight against apartheid. And he said that this long walk to freedom was like climbing a mountain, and it's only once you reach the top of the mountain that you look down and you see that there's so many more paths that you must take now to come down from the mountain, and they lead to new heights and new destinations. So inshallah, may Allah guide Medina to those new heights and destinations.
Ameen, ameen.
So today, Ya Jama'ah, the title of the khutbah is The Call of Islam. The Call of Islam, what does that mean? Well, as I'm sure many here who are South African from Cape Town, but also many other places, you've encountered this concept known as being Mukalf, right? Someone who is responsible, someone who has been entrusted with the duties of the deen. Once you become Mukalf, that is when you're required to follow all of your fara'id. That is when you are required to make sure that you make your salah, that you fast Ramadan, etc. Now, you may have also remembered, if you paid attention during madrasa, if not, here's a refresher, that there are 4 requirements in order to be a Mukallaf. The first is that you are baligh, meaning that you are pubescent, you've reached puberty. The second is that you are akil, which means that you have a sound intelligence. The third is that you are salim al-hawas, meaning you have sound senses, your sight, your hearing, your touch, your feel, etc. Whether you're abled or differently abled in different ways, that it's sound. And the last is dawah-tul-Islam, that the message or the call of Islam has reached you. Now, this shart, this condition, refers to a very kind of technical thing about what do people who haven't become Muslim or who haven't encountered the message of Islam, what happens to them? Do they have to do their fara'id? Are they saved? So these are all important technical questions when it comes to akira and I think fiqh. But what I'd like to address today in terms of dawah-tul-Islam, or the call of Islam, the calling, is some other dimensions of what this wider call to Islam should mean to us as believers. So dear brothers and sisters, there's a few questions that guide this khutbah and that I think that we should all reflect upon, firstly myself, in hearing this khutbah and in leaving today on back to our normal lives. What does the call of Islam mean to me personally, in terms of myself, my own being, and my relationship to Allah? And what does the call of Islam mean to me as a social being, as one who's called to do work in the community in this short time we have here on the Dunya? I'd like to first start with a bit of my own relationship to the call of Islam and how I was called to Islam. So although I have a name that is Arabic, and I am partially of Arab ancestry, my father's side being Arab and Muslim, my mother's side being white American and Christian, I only came to Islam later in life, in my late teens and early 20s. I was primarily raised by a single working class mother who worked hard to put food on the table. She worked 2 to 3 jobs at times to make ends meet. Alhamdulillah, if it wasn't for my Christian mother, I wouldn't have become the Muslim, or the attempted Muslim I am today. I was primarily raised by my mother. My parents got divorced when I was very young. Nominally raised Catholic. I was baptized. I had First Communion, one of these Catholic rites, fairly late. I was always kind of bored in church. I didn't kind of like standing up, sitting, standing up, sitting. Most kids just want to play. I think this applies to all religions. By the time I got to high school, I was a convinced atheist. I think a lot of the stuff we were taught in schools can lead to that. I was taught that science was God. So I reached a point where I said, if you don't believe in science and as the truth, the haqq, then you're crazy. As I progressed a bit later into life, my late teens, I began to have spiritual experiences, opening up to a spiritual dimension in life. And I explored different religions, Buddhism, Jainism, Indian religion, Hinduism, Confucianism, Native American traditions, also Islam. And Alhamdulillah, I finally came to Islam in that journey. And there was 2 things that called me to Islam, that guided me there. And one was a deeply personal, existential angst that I had as a human. I had questions. I was confused. I needed a paradigm for my life, how to deal with right and wrong. What's going to happen to me after I die? So on one level that was there, the very personal, existential, spiritual crisis. And the other was I was searching for a way of being socially, a way of being a human with and for others, in community, contributing to the good in life. And I remember at the end of this very spiritual phase, I was like really out there, folks. If I use kind of the Sufi term of fana billah, this annihilation in God, I was a vegetarian, making dhikr all the time. My hair was long, my beard was long, and all love and respect to Nabi Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. But I was starting to kind of look like a Jesus figure. I am partially Palestinian, so I mean kind of the look fits. But it was actually once I felt, I mean, astaghfirullah, I don't think I reached that level, but when I was in those heavens, I realized that the only way I could come down from this profound spiritual experience was through Islam. Because Islam gave me that balance between dunya and akira, between my own personal pursuit in life and the social pursuit that was required of me. And these 2 dimensions will continue to reflect on them. So that's a bit of myself. I mean, I'm sure people could tell that I'm from here, so I just want to share a bit of my background. In coming to South Africa and studying here, it's my 4th year now, and I'm a BA student at Madina Institute this year. I've been very, very thankful to have this experience with many of my fellow students and administrators and teachers. I thank them, Jazakallah khairan, very much for this experience I've had. I also happen to be a postgraduate student at the University of Johannesburg, and I've learned a lot about being Muslim in South Africa. This has actually been kind of my Islamic home. I converted later. I was 22 when I converted. Only a few years later, I moved here to pursue studies. And I think Muslims in South Africa really have it good in certain ways. And I think it's in large part due to the history of Islam here and how Muslims were involved in shaping society and their involvement in anti-apartheid struggle. But I mean, you have no systemic Islamophobia here. You can be any kind of Muslim here. Pious, not pious, Salafi, Sufi. Whether you agree with one of these paths is not what we're talking about. But basically here, you're not hated or watched simply for being Muslim here. And it creates a very beautiful dynamic for you to be human and to have this relationship with Allah that is so deeply personal, but also challenging in terms of the ethics you must embody. And I think this freedom that Muslims have benefited from in South Africa has a large part to do with the history of their ancestors here. I mean, if we think of all of the kramats and all the different shuyukh who upheld Islam, not only for personal acts of ibadah and teaching the Muslims the correct akira, the right belief and practice, that's important. But all of these shuyukh who had been imprisoned and sent away from their homelands to come here and were taken by the Dutch and other colonizers, they also invited a social dimension to their practice of Islam that allowed Islam to survive here. I remember when we went earlier in the year at Madina to a tour of Mukalf, and we went up to Tuan radiallahu anhu's cemetery, his grave. And our guide, a local Cape Townian, Grunewald, was sharing with us how many of the prisoners, non-Muslims on Robben Island, the Nelson Mandelas, the Ahmed Katralas, the Robert Sebukwe's, they looked to these Muslim ancestors who they didn't share any ethnic or religious affiliation to as embodiments of what it means to be a good human. In all of those long years that Mandela was locked up for decades, he continuously looked to this legacy. It was one of the things he looked to. He would visit the Kramat there on Robben Island, and they viewed themselves as a continuation of this long walk towards freedom. We also must remember, it being the 50th year anniversary of the assassination and demise of Imaam Abdullah Haroon, and this year, just very recently, the passing of his beloved wife, the legacy of the Imaam Abdullah Haroons, who, the mid-20th century, he was one of a kind. Many were scared to speak out as he did. He embodied, I think, this self and social dimension of being deeply committed. Doing da'wah in the townships when many of the other ulama were not willing to go to other townships that didn't immediately have to do with the pre-established Muslim communities. If we fast forward a bit to the 70s and 80s, more Muslims began to arise in South Africa who embodied this deep commitment to spirituality and faith on a personal level, but also on a social level. I mentioned 3 organizations now. One of them I know better, and I'll be able to relate to a bit more. But we have, for example, Qibla, which the Cape Townians here may remember or know. Was a Muslim organization that was inspired mainly by the Iranian Revolution, as well as the Pan-Africanism of Robert Sebukwe, the Pan-African Congress. They were involved in this self and social purification mission. We have the Muslim youth movement. People in here may have been a part of it, still a part of it, who were not affiliated to any political party per se, but were very involved in da'wah to their own selves, to their own nafs, but also to society, to help Muslims transform and change and fight injustice. And then we have, and I swear, I didn't take this name from them, but I think it's kind of auspicious that they have this name. We have the Call of Islam, which was another South African Muslim organization that arose in the 80s. And I don't only mention it because my supervisor at the University of Johannesburg was one of the co-founders, but I do know a bit more about it because of that. And it was an organization aligned with the ANC and what was known then as the United Democratic Front, which was kind of the mass-based movement of trade unions, women's organizations, political parties, so on and so forth, that worked hard in the last years of apartheid to mobilize against the misery that blacks were experiencing in this country. And I mention these organizations, and specifically the Dawah of Islam, because I think we can learn a lot from what they did in this context now, for the born-frees, for the quote-unquote post-apartheid context here, and I think also globally as Muslims. South African Islamic history has a lot to teach the Ummah and all of humankind. You had so many men and women who dedicated themselves to small halqas through the Dawah of Islam, where they came to read Quran, to read Hadith, to study the Seerah, to study the Sunnah, and reflect deeply on what it means to be a believer and someone who's a gharib, who's a stranger in this life, in the Dunya. So they definitely had that dimension of struggling with their own faith and wanting to learn more and increase in knowledge and increase in iman. But they also viewed their life purpose as one that must command good and forbid evil. Amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy 'anil munkar, which is one of the most beautiful and central Quranic ethics that Allah has passed down to us, has revealed to us. And they were involved in many different activities, both small and big. So I mean, when we think of these organizations and try to relate them to our time now, it's not about making some big statement. It's not about having the best looking outfit, the best looking event that you put on. I mean, people who would just make food, people who would print things, people who would deliver letters, people who would simply show up to a meeting or a rally. These were the people, the masses and nas that the Quran speaks to as a trust for Allah here on the dunya. These were the people who lived dawah-tul-Islam, the call of Islam, in my humble opinion. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from this history in South Africa, both old and newer, and in our own personal lives. For those of us who happen to have come later to Jumu'ah, I don't say late, you're not late for Jumu'ah, for Jumu'ah unless you miss the Arabic khutbah and salah. You still gain Jumu'ah salah if you attend these two things. But we're talking about the self and the social call to Islam. I shared a bit about my own experience coming from a partially Muslim family, being inspired to both salvation through Islam, but also working hard to do good in the limited time I had here in the dunya. And I think that's a challenge for all of us. We've talked a bit about the long history of all the different ordinary Muslims and ulama in South Africa who have struggled to try and answer this call. And I think for us, the time is now. The time is now for us to realize in our own unique ways how to answer this call. Whether you're someone working here in town as an accountant, as a lawyer, as information technology, whether you're someone who's doing construction on the buildings right here, whether you're homeless, whether you are a stay-at-home mom or dad, you have to find your ways to answer this call, to please Allah. And I think I'm very much guided in this light by a verse from the Quran, from Surah Nisa, ayah 135. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين. O those who believe, be standard bearers for justice, witnessers to Allah, even if it means going against your own selves, your own nafs, or that of your parents, or those who are close to you. يَكُنْ غَنِيًّا أَوْ فَقِيرًا, whether poor or rich, فَاللَّهُ أُولَى بِهِمَا, because Allah can take best care of these matters. The verse continues talking about following not the lust, the hawa, your desires and lust of your lower nafs, unless you want to go off the sirat al-mustaqim, the straight path. and it speaks about not distorting justice and about declining injustice, because Allah knows all that we do in our private and social lives. I'm also reminded of the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, مَنْ رَأَ مِنْكُمْ مُنْكِرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. Whomever from amongst you witnesses, sees in a wrongdoing, that which displeases Allah, he or she must change it with his hand. And if they're not able to, they must change it with their tongue. And if they're still not able to, they must at least pray about it in their heart. Change it through their heart. And that is the lowest of faith. But it is still something. There's always a place. There's always a time. There's always a moment where you as a believer can start your journeying to answer this call of Islam, both personally and socially. Don't put too much pressure on yourself in the beginning. I mean, we don't get from the 7th floor to the beautiful 3rd floor in Medina in one day. It's been over almost a decade of hard work. You don't make it to the top of the pyramid without first the building blocks. So, dear brothers and sisters, fellow believers, please reflect on these verses in this hadith as we continue to strive in our own struggles and dealings in this limited time on earth. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Jazakumullah khairan jaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept Brother Iskander. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take him from strength to strength, inshallah. And may he continue in his journey of seeking beneficial knowledge. And may he grow from strength to strength. Him together with his wife, who has joined him as well on the BA program of Madina Institute, as well as his colleagues and fellow students. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a great momentous occasion. It's also a sad moment because a lot of sacrifices and a lot of blood and tears was sacrificed by many selfless individuals, males and females, to give birth to the Madina project, which started out in 2013 with our first batch of students in 2014. But we cannot thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough. It is the du'as of people, the sacrifices of people. And just to add to what Brother Iskander said, what made South African Muslims great was selfless sacrifice on the part of some that benefited many. It was at a time where people were focused on we, and if we transition from we to me, then we are going to come down tumbling the mountain. Selfless sacrifice is needed, and if that is what we learned from our pious ancestors and those who made selfless sacrifices, then nothing substantial will be gained if we are selfish. We have to be selfless. And if we want to be great again, selfless sacrifices are needed by each and everyone. Everyone has to contribute to make us great again, inshallah. And that's the message we take, inshallah. The other thing as well is Madina Institute has grown 2014 to 2019. This is now our 6th batch. This year we will have our 6th batch of graduates. And they, alhamdulillah, have literally gone all over the world. People have come from all over the world to study in Cape Town at the bottom tip of Africa. And many have returned to their hometowns and they're contributing positively, providing hope, growth and opportunity. Last year, we were accredited by the Department of Higher Education. So we now give an accredited BA Islamic Studies in Deen, a degree for those who go on the 3-year track. So alhamdulillah, with that great gift Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, the premises has become small because as you go into your 2nd year and your 3rd year, it's more classes and we have intake for the 1-year gap year program of Deen. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with the 3rd floor. Also for the musallis on Friday, if the truth be told, we couldn't see you walking up 7 floors anymore. we had to take you and make it easy for you so that your climb will only be 3 floors inshallah. So today officially is our last Jumu'ah on the 7th level, on the 7th floor. And inshallah from next week you are invited to our beautiful new Madina campus and Musalla, Madina Musalla on the 3rd floor inshallah. And Jazakumullah khairan jaza for being part of this Jama'ah. And we hope that your journey with Madina will continue forevermore. There's only one favor we ask of you. If your experience has been good, and you know we also use this platform to empower our young students, to give them an opportunity to make khutbah, to become a khatib, and preparation to become an imam out there. So Alhamdulillah, we thank you for your patience in also accommodating them when there has been certain times when they could have done better. But Alhamdulillah, we are very proud of our students. Also, we ask you to make special dua for our students who are writing the exams. But as I mentioned, if there's one favor we can ask of each and every one of you that has been coming here for Jumu'ah, we don't need money, but if you have, please do share with us. But what we need from you is to be an ambassador to give those children in your family, your cousins, your nephews, your nieces, your children, your neighbor's child who is coming out of matric, and you can see this child needs some direction. Man arafa rabbahu faqad arafa nafsahu. If they study about Allah, if you study about your Lord, you will get to know yourself better. Give them the best gift by giving them an opportunity, recommending them to come to Madina inshallah. Enroll for Madina 2020 inshallah. Either the BA program or the Usuluddin Gap Year program before they go out to university or to work. Recommend that to them and give them that information, that give Madina Institute and make it a viable option in the various options that you have. If their foundation is strong, then they can go out. We call it, what we do in Madina is piling. We don't do a foundation for a residential development. We are here in a multi-skyscraper building. We do foundation for a skyscraper building. That means a solid foundation we give them, inshallah. And then they can build whatever they want to for the rest of their lives, inshallah. So please make dua for our students. There's also one of our students, Dawah who is ill, and the mother of Muhammad Luwande, one of our first graduates of Madina, and Buddha Siddiq. They are not in the best of health. Please make dua, Allah grant them shifa inshallah. And 2020 applications are open inshallah. Next week inshallah, next week Friday Jumu'ah inshallah. We look forward to welcoming you on a slight, just 3-story walk up at our new premises inshallah. On the 3rd floor of the same building, the Icon building. It's not about the decor, right? And it's really an amazing facility Allah has facilitated for us at Madina, and you will see that next week. It's about the ruh, and the ruh is the students. If we have good students, we have those who have the attitude, aptitude and altitude. We want those students to come to Madina so that our community leaders and our imams and our shuyukh and those who are the chairmen of industry in the future, they will have a solid foundation in the deen and provide hope, growth and opportunity for all. Once again, Jazakumullah khairan jaza, and we look forward to a substantial, long-standing relationship for many, many more years to come, inshallah.
The staircase, Sheikh Ma'am, the staircase is at Qatar A.
The
staircase,
The entrance.
Fire escape at Qatar A.
Right.
And straight in the building.
By Qatar A.
Not the staircase.
Not the staircase, on that staircase.
The one with Qatar.
You see the brother that's giving us this announcement, do you know why he knows so much? Brother Rafiq. Because he built the 3rd floor. Please make a special dua for him. Allah grant him, he's actually a Haji Rafiq now. He went for Hajj and came back. And he still delivered Madina Institute on time on the 3rd floor. Allah grant him long life and good health inshallah. The stairway to the 3rd floor is not on this side, but it's there next to Qatar Airways inshallah. We get no commission for advertising Qatar Airways.
Yeah.